Hey everyone, I never imagined I'd be sharing something like this, but here we are, so buckle up, because this is going to be a wild ride. My name's Mike, and I was married to this woman named Emily for 6 years. Now, before you think we were the picture-perfect couple, let me tell you we definitely were not. But still, I thought we had a good thing going. Things started to feel off about a month ago. Emily's phone was always with her, she never put it down. Every notification had her jumping to check it, grinning at the screen like she'd just won XXXX the jackpot. She also got really secretive whenever I walked into the room. She would hide her phone as if she were protecting top-secret information. Suddenly she had late nights at work, but in all the years I'd known her, the only time she stayed up late was to binge-watch Friends on Netflix. I played dumb, because a part of me didn't want to believe what I was starting to suspect. We had a nice home, a comfortable life, so why would she risk ruining that? But my gut wouldn't let it go. Something felt wrong, and I couldn't ignore it no matter how hard I tried. Then one night, everything changed. I was packing for a business trip that was just an overnight stay a couple of hours away. We were sitting at the dinner table, chatting about nothing in particular, but Emily was overly cheerful, like she couldn't wait for me to leave. That's when it hit me. Her whole vibe was like someone eagerly awaiting a package they'd ordered, except I was the one who was leaving. Later that night, I overheard her whispering on the phone, sounding like a teenager sneaking out of the house. Emily was never good at keeping secrets, so it wasn't hard to put the pieces together. I caught snippets of her conversation. She said things like, "Tomorrow night's perfect, he'll be gone, and my personal favorite, don't worry, we'll have the place to ourselves." Real subtle, right? Lying next to her that night, I couldn't sleep. A cold anger was boiling inside me, but I didn't confront her. I needed to be strategic. I wasn't about to blow up and give her the chance to cover her tracks. No, I had a plan. I could have confronted her right then, grabbed her phone, and demanded to know who she was sneaking around with. But I was too furious for that. I wanted to hit her where it hurt most, with the element of surprise. I wanted to catch her in the act, leaving her no room for excuses. So I decided not to go on that business trip after all. The next day, I told my boss I needed some personal time, and thankfully, he was cool with it and approved my request. My next stop was an electronics store, where I dropped a lot of money on surveillance equipment, cameras, hidden microphones, and everything I needed to monitor remotely. I wasn't going to play around. If she was going to have her little affair in my house, I was going to see it all. While she was at work, I set up the cameras, hiding them like I'd seen in spy movies, in the living room, kitchen, bedroom, and even the bathroom, anywhere they might end up. But I wasn't just planning to watch this disaster unfold. No, I had another trick up my sleeve. See, we had dinner plans that night, and I made sure to cook. I spiked her meal with the strongest laxatives I could find. Petty? Sure. But when your wife is plotting to cheat on you in your own home, all bets are off. We sat down to eat, and Emily was glowing, thinking she was so slick, playing house with me while preparing to bring another man into my bed. She ate her meal, none the wiser, while I pretended everything was fine, knowing her night was about to take a dramatic turn. After dinner, I kissed her on the cheek, grabbed my suitcase, and said, "See you tomorrow night, babe." She waved me off, acting like the perfect wife, and off I went. Except I didn't go far. I drove just 10 minutes away to a hotel. I set up my laptop, connected to the cameras, and waited. Watching your wife prepare your home for another man is something you don't forget. She was bustling around, fixing her hair and putting on a new dress I'd never seen before. The nerve. And then the doorbell rang. From my hotel room, I watched her rush to the door like a giddy teenager. She fluffed her hair one last time, smoothed her dress, and opened the door to her Prince Charming, but this guy looked like the janitor from a rundown motel. His name, as I later found out, was Brad, because of course it was. Balding, beer gut, and looking like he hadn't seen a gym in years. This was the guy she was willing to risk everything for. I sat back with my beer, ready for the show. Brad walked in carrying a cheap bottle of wine, acting like they were about to have some grand romantic night. They started chatting and laughing awkwardly, like teenagers on a first date, and it made my skin crawl. Then I noticed Emily shifting uncomfortably in her seat. I knew exactly what was happening. The laxatives were kicking in. She excused herself casually and hurried to the bathroom, while Brad sat there clueless, sipping his wine. Meanwhile, I watched her through the hidden camera in the bathroom, and she was clearly not doing well. She was on the toilet, her face twisted in pain. It was a full-blown intestinal meltdown. She tried to wrap it up quickly, but it wasn't the kind of situation you just walk away from. When she finally returned to Brad, she was pale and visibly flustered, but tried to act like nothing was wrong. Brad, still hoping for some romance, scooted closer, trying to get intimate, but just as things were about to heat up, Emily bolted for the bathroom again. I nearly choked on my beer from laughing. By the time she came back out the second time, it was clear the night wasn't going according to her plans. Brad was frustrated, and Emily was utterly humiliated. Emily and Brad tried to salvage their night, but every time things started to get even slightly intimate, Emily had to rush desperately to the bathroom again. It felt like watching a never-ending soap opera punchline unfold while I sat in my hotel room with popcorn and a beer, enjoying every second. They tried watching a movie, but Emily couldn't sit still for more than 5 minutes without excusing herself again. Brad eventually realized something was seriously wrong and kept asking if she was okay, but Emily repeatedly lied, insisting she was fine and blaming it on something she had supposedly eaten earlier, though it was clear she hadn't touched the imaginary salad. As the evening dragged on, any romantic atmosphere evaporated. Brad was annoyed, Emily was humiliated, and the whole night was a complete disaster. They started arguing, with Brad accusing her of being distant, while Emily, visibly irritated and struggling to keep it together, stormed off to the bathroom one last time. That was the breaking point for Brad. He grabbed his jacket and left without another word. Watching her sit alone, probably wondering how her perfect evening had spiraled into the worst date ever, gave me a satisfaction I can't quite describe, but the night's drama was far from over. From my hotel room, I watched as the aftermath of the world's most disastrous date played out. Emily was alone, likely replaying the whole evening in her mind, trying to pinpoint where it all went wrong, while I sat there grinning, fully aware that the laxative-induced chaos was my doing. It was petty, sure, but after everything I'd witnessed, I felt entitled to a little revenge. Emily slumped back onto the couch, clearly drained from her constant bathroom trips and the emotional mess of the night. She sent a few texts, probably attempting to explain herself to Brad, but he didn't respond. Frankly, I didn't blame him. If I had been in his shoes, I'd have ghosted her too. Emily looked on the verge of tears, but I felt nothing. In fact, I felt a bit smug watching her squirm. After some time, she gave up trying to fix the night, tossing her phone aside in frustration. She was likely mad at Brad, at herself, and at the universe for ruining her evening, though she had no idea that the universe was actually me, and I was far from finished. By the next morning, I had a clear plan. I wasn't going to keep living in a house where I knew she'd been betraying me behind my back. When I returned that afternoon, Emily greeted me as if nothing had happened, putting on a fake smile, pretending she hadn't been trying to hide her dirty little secret. "How was your trip?" she asked, but I wasn't playing along. "We need to talk," I said bluntly, and that wiped the smile right off her face. "I know what you've been up to," Emily, I continued, watching as her whole demeanor changed. She tried to stammer out a denial, but I cut her off. "Don't. I've seen everything, the cameras, the texts, your little plan to have Brad over while I was away. I know it all." Her face turned pale for a moment. I thought she might faint, but instead, she switched tactics, breaking down into tears and pleading. "Mike, it's not what you think," she sobbed. "I was just lonely, and we've been so distant lately. I made a mistake, but I swear I didn't sleep with him. Nothing happened." I couldn't help but laugh. "Nothing happened because you spent the night glued to the toilet, Emily." I made sure of that. She looked stunned, her eyes widening in shock. "Yeah, I put laxatives in your dinner. If you were going to cheat on me in my own house, the least I could do was make sure it wasn't enjoyable." She tried to reach out, but I stepped back. "Don't touch me. I don't care about your excuses or feelings. You've been lying to me for who knows how long, and now it's over." She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably, but I remained unmoved. "You've got until the end of the week to pack your things and get out," I said coldly. "If you're not gone by then, I'll throw your stuff in the trash. And don't even think about trying to guilt me into anything. I've already filed for divorce. You're done." I could see the panic set in as she realized I wasn't bluffing. "Please, Mike, I'll do anything. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. I don't want to lose you," she begged, her voice shaking. "Too late for that," I replied, turning my back on her. "You didn't care about losing me when you brought that loser into our house. Now, you'll have to live with the consequences." I left her crying on the couch and locked myself in the bedroom. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into forgiveness. It was over. She knew it. I knew it. And soon enough, everyone else would know it too. What Emily didn't realize was that I still had one final card to play. I'd like to say I felt some sort of relief after our confrontation, but honestly, I was still furious. The entire situation felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from, and her tears did nothing to ease my anger. While she wept in the living room, I stayed locked in the bedroom, putting the finishing touches on my plan. Kicking her out and filing for divorce wasn't enough. I wanted her to truly feel the weight of her betrayal. Emily might have thought she could cheat on me and get away with a half-hearted apology, but I wasn't letting her off easy. And as for Brad, well, he had his own reckoning on the horizon. I woke up before Emily did. It felt like living with a ghost. She'd spent the night in the guest room, likely crying herself to sleep, and honestly, I didn't care. I grabbed my phone and made some calls, first to my lawyer to finalize the divorce papers, wanting her served by the end of the week, and then to Brad's wife. Yes, you heard that right, Brad had a wife named Jessica, completely unaware of her husband's deceit. Lucky for her, I knew everything. Calling her that morning wasn't something I looked forward to, but it had to be done. The phone rang a few times before she answered with a bright and cheerful hello, not knowing what was about to hit her. "Hi, Jessica," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "My name's Mike, I'm Emily's husband." There was a pause. I could almost hear her thoughts racing. "Oh, Mike, hi. Is everything okay?" she asked, clearly puzzled. Taking a deep breath, I got straight to the point. "Listen, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but you need to know Brad has been seeing my wife behind your back. They were planning to meet at my house while I was away. I have proof, and I thought you deserved to see it." Another long silence followed before she quietly asked, "Are you sure about this?" Unfortunately, yes, I responded, feeling anger simmering within me. "I've got emails, texts, and security footage. I can send you everything if you want." I hung up, glancing at Emily, who was still hiding out in the guest room, probably hoping I'd have a change of heart. Spoiler alert, I wasn't going to. Later that day, I met Jessica at a small coffee shop nearby. When I saw her, I was taken aback. Jessica was stunning, and it made me question how Brad could cheat on her with Emily. Not that my wife wasn't attractive, but compared to Jessica, it was like trading a luxury car for a beat-up minivan. Jessica's face fell when I handed her the evidence, emails, screenshots, and video clips. Watching her reaction as she read through everything, I almost felt guilty for delivering such crushing news, but she deserved the truth, and Brad deserved whatever consequences were coming. We sat and talked for a while about the mess we were both in. She thanked me for telling her, even though she was visibly shattered, repeatedly shaking her head and saying things like, "How could he do this?" And I thought we were happy. We exchanged numbers, and I assured her I'd provide any additional evidence or support she needed. I wasn't trying to be her hero, but we were both trapped in this betrayal, so looking out for each other felt right. As I walked back to my car, I realized that Emily's affair and her life as she knew it was officially over. She wasn't just losing me, Brad was about to lose his wife, and once that happened, everything would crumble. But I wasn't done yet. After meeting Jessica, I felt oddly calm. The wheels were in motion, and I knew it wouldn't be long before Emily and Brad's world fell apart. They thought they could deceive us, but now the truth was out, and I was eager to see how they would handle the fallout. When I got home that night, Emily was at the kitchen table, looking like she hadn't slept. There was this pitiful, hopeful look in her eyes, as if she believed I might forgive her. I didn't have the patience for that. "You've got 3 days," I said, tossing a copy of the divorce papers onto the table. "I'll be staying at a friend's place until you're out. If you're still here by the end of the week, I'll have the cops remove you." Emily blinked in disbelief. "Mike, wait, please. We can talk about this. I didn't actually sleep with him. Can't we just?" I cut her off. I don't care if you slept with him or not. You planned to, and that's all that matters. You betrayed me, Emily, and there's no fixing this." She tried to argue, to backtrack, to plead her case, but I'd had enough of the lies, excuses, and crocodile tears. Every word out of her mouth was just another manipulation. I turned and walked away, listening to her sob as I went upstairs to pack a bag, but it didn't move me. I had bigger priorities now. Before leaving, I dropped one final bombshell. "Oh, by the way," I said casually, leaning against the door frame, "I met up with Brad's wife today." I showed her everything. Emily's expression was priceless. She looked as if the blood had drained from her entire body. "You what?" she gasped, her voice trembling. "Yep," I replied. "Turns out Brad's been lying to her too. She knows everything now, and I wouldn't be surprised if she's already talking to a divorce lawyer." Emily looked like she'd been punched in the gut, her hands shaking as she stared at me in panic. "Mike, no, why would you do that? This is between us," she cried. I laughed at her nerve. "Between us? Are you serious? You destroyed our marriage, Emily. Now you have to deal with the fallout." Brad's wife deserves the truth just as much as I did." She stood up, her face twisted in desperation. "But Mike, I love you. I didn't want this. I wasn't thinking," she stammered. I shook my head slowly. "You weren't thinking about me, that's for sure. You were thinking about yourself and Brad. You didn't care what this would do to me, or to us. Now it's over, you made your choice, and now you have to live with it." I left the house with Emily standing there, stunned. Part of me wondered if she really believed I'd let this slide, that we could somehow fix things and move on. But that was never going to happen. Trust, once broken, can't be mended, and Emily had shattered it beyond repair. As I drove to my friend's place, my phone buzzed. It was Jessica. I confronted Brad, her text read. He tried to deny it, but when I showed him the proof, he broke down and admitted everything. "I'm filing for divorce." I couldn't help but feel a grim sense of satisfaction. Brad and Emily thought they could sneak around and live happily ever after, but now their entire world was falling apart, and they had no one to blame but themselves. Over the next few days, everything unraveled quickly. I stayed at my friend Dave's place, who was more than happy to hand me a beer and give a good riddance speech when I told him what happened. He'd never liked Emily much, though he kept that to himself until now. His support meant a lot, even if it felt surreal to be crashing on his couch while my soon-to-be ex-wife was left figuring out her next move. Emily, of course, tried every trick to win me back. Texts, calls, voicemails, all filled with the same desperate apologies. "It was a mistake, Mike. I'll do anything to fix this. Please don't throw away our marriage," Emily pleaded, as if I was the one ending things. She'd wrecked everything the moment she started sneaking around behind my back. I ignored all her messages. The only conversations left would be in court. Meanwhile, things with Brad and his wife Jessica were also imploding. Within 48 hours, Brad was served with divorce papers and kicked out of their home. He tried the same sob story on Jessica that Emily had pulled on me, but Jessica was too smart and strong to fall for it. Jessica and I stayed in touch throughout the chaos, not exactly becoming close, but sharing a sense of solidarity. We were both dealing with the same betrayal, and having someone who truly understood helped. We texted occasionally, comparing updates on how everything was unraveling. There was something oddly comforting in knowing I wasn't the only one whose life had been upended. Then, on that Friday, I received a text from Emily. "Mike, I'm coming to pick up my things. Please be home so we can talk." I rolled my eyes. There was nothing left to discuss, but I figured it was time to get her out of my life for good. I agreed to meet her at the house because I didn't trust her to go through our things without me being there. When I pulled up that afternoon, she was already waiting in her car, looking terrible, like she hadn't slept or eaten in days. For a split second, I felt a tiny bit of pity, but it was quickly overshadowed by the memory of her betrayal. She'd made her bed, and now she was lying in it. I got out of my car and walked over, crossing my arms as I leaned against the porch railing. "You've got until tomorrow to get your stuff and go," I said bluntly, skipping any pleasantries. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "Mike, please. Can't we at least try to talk?" she asked. I sighed, shaking my head. "What's left to talk about, Emily? You cheated, you lied, you broke our marriage. You're out of chances. It's over." She started to speak, but then stopped, realizing there was nothing she could say to change my mind. "I still love you," she mumbled, as if she were trying to convince herself. I let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, well, I used to love you too, but that was before you decided Brad was worth more than our entire marriage. No, I don't feel anything for you now." Her face fell, and for a moment it looked like she might beg again, but instead she just nodded, defeated. "Fine," she whispered. "I'll pack my things." I watched her walk into the house, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders for the first time in days. This was at the end of the line. As she packed, I stood in the living room, observing her toss clothes into boxes with slow, sluggish movements like she was in a daze. A part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, but I couldn't. Not after all she'd done. It took a few hours, but when she was finished, the house felt lighter, as if her presence had been suffocating me and I could finally breathe again. She dragged the last of her bags to the car, and I followed her to the door. "Goodbye, Emily," I said flatly, my tone offering nothing but finality. She turned to look at me one last time, her eyes filled with regret. "Goodbye, Mike," she whispered, then got in her car and drove away. I watched her taillights fade into the distance, and for the first time in a long while, I felt free. But just when I thought it was all over, life threw one last curveball at me. After Emily's car disappeared, I stood there, staring at the empty street, feeling a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. It was finally over, or so I thought. I went back inside, ready to collapse on the couch and enjoy the quiet of my newly Emily-free life, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jessica. "We need to talk. Call me when you can." I raised an eyebrow. We'd been keeping in touch, but this felt urgent. I didn't hesitate to call her, pressing the phone to my ear as I sat down. "Hey, what's up?" I asked. Jessica's voice was shaky, as if she was holding back tears. "Mike, I just found out something about Brad, something you need to know." My heart sank. I thought I'd hit rock bottom with this whole nightmare. "Okay, hit me," I said, bracing myself. She hesitated before dropping the bomb. Brad wasn't just seeing Emily, he was seeing other women too. A lot of them. I found messages, emails. Emily was just one of many. My jaw tightened. "You're telling me Emily wasn't even his only affair?" I asked, trying to wrap my head around it. "Not even close," Jessica replied, her voice dripping with bitterness. "Brad's been cheating with multiple women, and from what I can tell, Emily was just another name on the list. I thought you should know." I sat there stunned, realizing Emily hadn't just been involved with some guy who'd swept her off her feet. She was just one in a long line of Brad's conquests. My anger, which I thought had reached its peak, flared up again. Emily had thrown away our marriage for a man who treated her like nothing, and that made the whole thing even sadder. "Thanks for letting me know," I finally said, trying to process everything. "I guess it's just more proof that they both deserve whatever's coming." Jessica sighed, sounding as exhausted as I felt. "Yeah, it's been a rough few days. I'm filing for divorce, obviously, but I don't know, Mike, it all feels like a bad dream." I couldn't believe this was my life now. I nodded, even though Jessica couldn't see me. "Trust me, I understand. But we're doing the right thing. We're both better off without them." She was silent for a moment before responding. "You're right. It's just hard to see that sometimes, you know." I did know. "Yeah, but we'll get through this. They're the ones who have to deal with the fallout from their actions." We continued talking, mostly venting about how ridiculous the situation was, how Emily and Brad had managed to wreck 2 marriages over a meaningless fling. It would have been almost funny if either of us were in the mood to laugh. After we ended the call, I stared at my phone for a while. Emily still didn't know about Brad's other affairs, that she wasn't anything special to him. A part of me wanted to tell her, to let her feel the weight of her own foolishness, but another part of me just didn't care anymore. She wasn't my problem now. A few days went by, and I settled into a new routine. The house was quieter, cleaner, and most importantly, free of the tension that had lingered for months. Emily tried messaging me a few more times, pleading for another chance, but I ignored her. It was done, and I had come to terms with it. Then one evening, I got an unexpected surprise. There was a knock on the door, and when I opened it, Jessica was there, looking just as exhausted as I felt. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," I replied, stepping aside to let her in. We sat down in the living room, and for a while we didn't talk about Emily or Brad or the affairs. We just talked about life and what came next. It was strange sharing that space with someone who had gone through the exact same storm, yet in many ways still felt like a stranger. But at the same time, it was comforting. We were both trying to navigate the aftermath and figure out how to rebuild. Eventually, Jessica gave me a small, tired smile, but it was genuine. "You know," she said, "it's strange, but I feel like we're going to be okay. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually." I nodded. "Yeah, we will," and for the first time since this nightmare began, I actually believed it. Sitting there in that quiet moment, I realized something important. Betrayal can break you, tear your world apart, and make you question everything. But it doesn't have to define you. It doesn't have to be the end. You can pick up the pieces, rebuild, and even find a bit of light in the darkness. Emily and Brad were just chapters in our lives, and now we were starting to write new ones. That's my story. If you're reading this and going through something similar, know that there's life after betrayal. You can get through it, move on, and maybe, just maybe, find something better on the other side. To my listeners, thank you for your amazing support and for following my stories on YouTube. Your enthusiasm and feedback mean everything to me. Stay tuned for more exciting tales. Warm regards.